At that time, Du Jun had to be admired. Chairman of the Acquisition Board Lee Young-cheo is really impressive. After graduating from the 16th Department of the Military Academy, he joined the Central Intelligence Agency during the Fifth Republic era and was a congressman of the Democratic Party. The chairman casually replied, "That's right." In the early days of the government, Lee Young-cheo would hold the power as the head of the secretary's office. It was very beneficial at that time. Returning to reality, Lee Young-cheo looked at Du Jun and asked, "Who is that young man over there?" Si-hoon quickly answered, "He is my employee. There will be no secrets between me and him. I intend to tell him about today's meeting. I hope you will let him join." After his uncle said that, Du Jun also bowed politely and pretended to greet. Lee Young-cheo said comfortably, "That's fine. There's nothing to hide anyway." He asked further, "I heard from Chairman Sun-yen that you intend to bring $2.2 billion of Fantasy's available funds in New York to Korea, right?" Si-hoon nodded eagerly and answered, "Yes, sir." Lee Young-cheo then asked, "Are there any conditions?" Si-hoon replied, "Yes, sir. The reason I met with you is also because of that condition." He took out a document and placed it on the table. The name of the document was Industrial Plan for SMC Construction and Communication. The chairman glanced at it briefly and still didn't say anything. Du Jun stood outside and thought. He didn't seem surprised when he mentioned $2.2 billion. It was clearly a number he heard for the first time. Why was he so calm? Or did he not know the value of $2.2 billion? The chairman calmly thought for a moment and then spoke. Why do investors want to get involved in construction? Finance and cement don't seem to match. Si-hoon hurriedly answered, "This plan does not discuss cement business. Although it also contributes to a completely different aspect. I hope you will evaluate it positively a little bit." The chairman heard that and asked, "If I'm positive, then you will pour dollars into Korea, right?" Si-hoon immediately answered yes. At this point, the chairman said, "Pour dollars, reap huge profits, then take that money back to America." This is not too understandable why. Perhaps the future of Action Group will not escape this fate either. After normalizing it, he would break up the group and sell it off and take the profits back to America. He looked at Si-hoon with displeasure and asked, "Is that right?" Si-hoon quickly replied, "No, sir, that's not it. We do the opposite." The chairman was puzzled and asked, "The opposite?" Then Du Jun said, "Yes, sir. We at Fantasy want to bring the money we make in America to Korea. Until now, our company has invested in Martin Computer, Microsoft, Hollywood Movies, Powercom Bank Japan and made a lot of profits. We use that money to buy back the Action Group, which can be said to be an export pillar." The chairman frowned and asked again, "Export pillar?" He laughed mockingly, "This young friend likes to joke, huh?" Du Jun replied, "Export is the action of earning dollars, right? We just don't sell raw products, but we still earn foreign currency." But the chairman still said, "That's how it looks now, but what about later?" Si-hoon answered, "If we only think about making money, then the exchange rate difference alone would be twice as much. But if the plan I proposed becomes a reality, it would be hard to guarantee a double profit." Then Si-hoon pleaded, "Please take a look at it once, Chairman." Lee Young-cheo was also starting to waver. He slowly picked up the file on the table. For people in their 60s and 70s, the export pillar was a symbol of pride and pride. The motivation that helped the poorest country in the world become an economic powerhouse was export. For those who had heard the story that Korea lacked resources, so human resources were a little bit and export was the only way to survive, they would surely feel uncomfortable when they heard the arrogant words from a guy who only knew how to play with money. After reading that report, the chairman said, "The plan to build for the Korean media sounds not bad. You intend to invest all $2.2 billion in the media industry, right?" Si-hoon replied, "No, we only invest a quarter of it. Actually, we want to invest in many fields. We plan to hand over the investment company in the US to the locals. And we will focus on Korea. The chairman heard that and slowly sat down seriously and asked, "What about IT?" Si-hoon was very surprised when the chairman asked about IT. At this time, the chairman continued, "Right, if you get huge profits when investing in Martin Microsoft, then I think IT is also a promised land, right?" Hearing the chairman ask about it made Si-hoon startled a bit. Do-jun understood that he must have lost a lot of money because he was the one who decided to invest in IT to revive the economy after falling into recession and IMS crisis. Didn't the government use force to nurture venture capital enterprises related to IT? In addition, the government also mentioned developing a strong culture. If you ignore the label of an American investment company of fantasy, Mediaset is very suitable for the core mission of the government. Thinking so, Do-jun said that IT would be very useful for developing small and medium enterprises when looking at the case of the US. The venture capital enterprises started from Silicon Valley developed so fast that they raised concerns that it was just a bubble. From the government's point of view, just turning the steering wheel would result in good results right away. The chairman was happy and said, "Young people really know this field well. Very smart." But Do-jun thought, just answer what the officials and politicians want to hear. The answer that Lee Young Trio wants is the bright future of IT. At this time, the chairman asked again, "What do you think? Do you consider investing in IT?" But Do-jun replied, "The chairman of Fantasy has no intention of investing in IT." The two old men were both itching with surprise when they heard him say that. At this time, the chairman turned from happy to angry. But Do-jun continued, "IT enterprises have to rely on breakthrough ideas and capabilities to develop. If there is private capital involved, they will only take ideas and technology. Don't let capitalists steal the youth of venture capitalists." The chairman was surprised and asked, "So the main subject of the industry must be the government, right?" Do-jun politely answered, "Yes, I think the government should prepare a beautiful flower garden and monitor the emergence of venture capital enterprises that build infrastructure for information technology. Just sit still and watch, you will see good results. Silicon Valley developed this way." The chairman heard this and seemed reasonable, then he started to calculate. Si-hoon had been sitting on one side listening, but he didn't understand anything. So the atmosphere fell into silence again. For the nth time after that, the chairman said, "I have heard some very good opinions. I will review this plan carefully and contact you later. Can you tell me about the $2.2 billion investment plan? I will actively consider it from the government's perspective." Hearing the chairman say that, Si-hoon was very surprised. Do-jun smiled secretly because he knew that the chairman's active consideration was another way of saying approval. Then the chairman took the initiative to shake hands with Si-hoon, who hastily grabbed the chairman's golden hand. Do-jun saw the scene. He was about to make more money, so he smiled happily. He thought to himself, "I was the one who gave the important opinion, but he didn't shake hands with me. This is how to distinguish the hierarchy." Then the two uncles and nephews walked away hand in hand. They had a car but didn't drive, they just suffered on the street. Si-hoon asked Do-jun, "Did you really mean it when you said you wouldn't invest in IT earlier?" Do-jun confirmed, "I meant it." Si-hoon asked in confusion, "Why?" "The government said they would invest, so it's like a gold mine. Besides, there are also many insurance companies coming to find us." But Do-jun remained silent, listening to his uncle talk, and then sighed. He told his uncle, "We are the owners of a company competing with Dian Moto. Venture capital is only a place for kids to dive in and make money. We have to play in big tournaments." Si-hoon was annoyed and said, "You are a bit arrogant. If it's a big scale, we shouldn't underestimate it." But Do-jun replied, "A few years ago when semiconductors were booming, did they know how much Sunyan Islet Chanel IC's activities were worth? About 2,000 billion won. No matter how big an insurance company is, it can't touch Sunyan Eyelet Chanel IC's toes. After saying that, Jun thought to himself. Hundreds of thousands of companies are waving at me. I don't have time to pay attention to IT companies that only increase their revenue by 1 to 2,000 billion after 20 years. Sehun said, you have to save every penny to make a lot of money. And who knows? What if someone like Jayam at Sanho appears? Jun said arrogantly. You just invest little by little in the field you like. At least you have to make some pocket money. His uncle looked at this rebellious kid with bullet-like eyes. But Jun just thought to himself, the company's worth investing in haven't appeared yet. According to my memory, Queeniac of NES Sun started operating last year and Zinger Bell of Axit started operating this spring. At this moment, Uncle Sehun shouted from behind Jun's back, Jun, don't be delusional. Jun was startled and turned around to reply, what are you talking about, Uncle? Do you think I can become a chairman of a conglomerate by meeting someone who has influence in the government and touching hundreds of billions of dollars? After speaking, Sehun frowned in anger. Jun was surprised because he didn't know why his uncle suddenly got angry. After that, Uncle Sehun was still angry. Jun still didn't understand. He wondered why his uncle had been angry for 10 years. This was the first time he was so furious. At this time, Sehun said, Chairman Jean only manages businesses worth billions of won. He even has to eat with people who have power in the government to keep hundreds of billions of won in benefits. Those are the things that a tycoon chairman needs to do. Jun was confused. He thought it was his own business. Why was his uncle so angry? Sehun continued, those people will lead 10,000 workers and try to earn every penny from the side dishes. Then they will ask, use that money to buy back the steel mill and build a site in China. Without workers, there will be no owners. Without farmers, there will be no landlords. Without people, there can be no king. And you. But the workers, farmers and common people don't have you, they only have a little money. Yet, you have already imitated a tycoon chairman. The side dishes they can earn billions, tens of billions, forget it, is that the price of the side dishes? Jun was very surprised to be scolded by his boss like that for the first time. But he knew that Sehun was right after 10 years. A former employee like him imitated a chairman. He didn't expect to become so arrogant. After self-examining himself, Jun bowed respectfully and said, I'm sorry, I was too naive. Sehun was stunned. He didn't expect that the kid would be so obedient today. He said awkwardly, you listen and understand quickly, it's good that you understand. Let's discuss a little bit, where do you think we should invest? Jun replied, well, why don't you just decide for yourself? Sehun answered, no, you can outline the direction, but your investment judgment and intuition are better than mine. You tell me, where do you not like? Jun thought for a while and said, then I choose a code and play online. Sehun was surprised because he didn't understand online games. Jun explained, yes, there are 2 places, each 1 billion. The rest is up to you. Sehun thought about online games and started to think. After thinking, Sehun said, use all 10 billion, forget it. The 2 of them will invest in games. The rest is less than 1 billion, I will split it to invest. Jun said, yes, as long as one place explodes, we can recover the capital. Sehun laughed and said, you just heard something about the next government investing in IT. How can there be only one place that explodes? Jun heard his boss say that and just smiled without saying anything. He thought to himself that in 5 years, the person he was very grateful to would retire. It was a pity. The winter of 1997 was unusually cold, the only winter without Christmas songs echoing through the streets. The big buildings were covered with cold snow. But inside those buildings were high-ranking officials sitting in meetings. The ones who ate a lot of bribes whispered to each other loudly and softly. The tycoons were cold and didn't bother talking to anyone. The people who held the most important money in the world were always relaxed and comfortable and favored by banks. They had never experienced such a cold wind before, so of course they would panic more. An old man asked us, "I heard that the merger discussion of Sunyan Motor has ended, now we can proceed with the acquisition procedure, right?" But Si-hoon replied, "We haven't signed the merger order of Sunyan Group yet, we are adjusting the shares." The old man asked again, "When will they finish adjusting over there?" Si-hoon answered, "You should ask that question to the Sunyan Group." "Why are you asking us?" Another man said, "Chairman Jin of Sunyan has made a commitment. The rest is just a procedure." At this point, Do-jun spoke up, "That's not all." The directors looked at this young man in astonishment. Where did he come from? One of them asked Si-hoon, "Excuse me, but who is he?" Si-hoon answered, "Oh, I called him urgently from the U.S. headquarters. He will take charge and manage this acquisition negotiation." Hearing that he came from the U.S., the directors and chairman became silent. Then they pretended to be casual and stood up and said, "We have been rude." Do-jun thought to himself, they were very curious about his position. They would surely check if he was qualified to take this role. Then, the directors took his business card and looked at the name Hako Jin on it and were stunned. Do-jun introduced himself, "I am a second-generation overseas Vietnamese, so I use an English name. Please excuse me." Do-jun calculated in his mind. Hako Jin, an employee at Fantasy's U.S. headquarters, a young overseas Vietnamese who manages the investment system of the headquarters. This also implied that Korea was in danger. Even the main headquarters had to show up. At this time, a polite director said, "Please continue, Do-jun." Calmly, Do-jun said, "The audit team of the headquarters is carefully reviewing this acquisition." The directors were shocked and said, "What? It was supposed to be a done deal. Why do they have to review it now?" Si-hoon also acted as if this was a serious issue. Do-jun thought to himself, in this situation, the bank still maintained the principle of not talking to the subordinates. Then Si-hoon scratched his head and said, "That's right. You all know that they only follow the system and don't listen to the directors. Because this is related to our company's system, we need to pay attention to this guy. He has a lot of opinions from Fantasy's U.S. investors. So please listen to him explain everything." The bank directors were shocked when they heard his origin. Do-jun said, "The original plan was as follows. The Sunyan Group wanted Achimoto, but they had bought Hando Steel and almost ran out of money. Then Fantasy appeared. We planned to temporarily take over Akin. Then when Sunyan had enough money, we would sell it back at a higher price. I think you can all guess this step." The directors became scared when they heard this. They were afraid that he would not buy it back. Do-jun continued, "But Korea suffered. There was a foreign exchange crisis. If the purchase price was 1.2 trillion won, if the exchange rate was 800 won, then it would be $1.5 billion. With an exchange rate of 1,800 won, but now it's only $670 million. What if the exchange rate goes up to 2,500 won?" When they heard this, the directors were terrified. When he heard the number $480 million, a director of the IMS Aid Fund took action. They had about $2 billion, so there was no way the exchange rate would rise to 2,500 won. The exchange rate would drop below 2,001 and soon stabilize. Do-jun calmly said, "They promised to have $5.5 billion, but in the end they only had $2 billion. The government had changed, so they had to renegotiate with the new government for $50 billion. Everyone also understood that they could not predict when they would have enough money." Hearing this, the three directors fell silent. One pushed his fake glasses pretending to be calm, another pretended to draw attention by smoking, or something like that. Jun continued, tomorrow was the beginning of 1998, and everyone had to arrange to settle this year's accounts. But looking at the books alone would not give an answer. When the government took power, they might restructure and merge banks. If they wanted to survive, they had to put Fantasy's dollars into the bank before the new year. Jun knew that export businesses earned dollars, while import businesses needed dollars. If they held dollars in their hands, these businesses would rush to demand dollar payments from foreign banks as well. So Jun continued. According to Fantasy's position, we, Korea, were very unstable. Many people doubted that Korea could recover. The Korean economy would decline to the standard of Southeast Asia. Hearing him declare that, the whole bank was shocked. A director asked, what did he mean by that? Jun looked at him with bullet-like eyes. Then he said, although we were the negotiators for buying priority rights, we wanted to give up our status. The three bank directors heard that and their eyes widened. Jun still calmly said, that means we will withdraw. If we give up buying Akin, the Hyun Group will show up, right? You guys should negotiate with them. The directors had a big headache when they heard how the Hyun Group showed up. They were still busy putting out fires there, let alone having any spirit of buying and selling. At the chairman's house, the chairman said, this kid, if you don't need to trade then fine. But acting like robbing 800 billion is not different from robbing 800 billion, right? But Jun replied, there is no robber who is willing to negotiate, sir. The chairman said, forcing the mouse into a dead end and making it choose. That's the knife. Jun sat quietly on one side, listening to his grandfather preaching morality, then remembered when he was at the bank. He had said that the purchase price was 800 billion won at an exchange rate of 2001, which was still $400 million. The bank director asked in fear, wasn't that price only 60% of the original purchase price? But Jun was the one with money, so he always acted superior. Jun said, if you guys accept, I will send $400 million to the designated account today. The directors liked money too, but it was too little, so they didn't dare to agree. Jun thought for sure they couldn't refuse this offer unconditionally. Back at the chairman's house, the chairman said, not giving time to think, you did very well. Give the mouse a corner, it will only escape in time. Jun confidently replied, wait until dawn, then everything will become clear. The grandfather chairman continued, I have to nail it to the post to get through your conditions, right? Jun looked at him blankly and answered, yes, but he was afraid of his eyes. Then he said, you should prepare a position as an advisor in Sunyan, I will pay all the costs. The old man looked at his grandson and smiled, you learn bad habits fast. Jun learn from him? Who else? He taught bad habits to his son, then he taught them to his son who was also his grandson. I just stayed by his side and learned from him. At this point, the chairman spoke up and replied, I know. Then he handed over a file and said, look at this. Jun was surprised. He took the file and opened it. He was shocked when he saw the notes in the document. This is a list of banks that have been sold and merged, the old cunning man said. I don't know what to do with it. It turned out to be for our Jun. Jun asked in astonishment, are the banks on this list also bought out? The chairman smiled happily and answered, I don't need to report such ordinary information to me. I only know the information about Hyun Group's level. Upon hearing this, Jun was so bewildered and panicked that he was almost foolish. The old chairman continued, the policy will be used effectively, consider it your lucky break. If they knew they were about to be unemployed, they would definitely cling on tightly, and maybe even a flock of vultures would come bowing their heads in thanks, Jun realized. Those papers and his beloved self, if he had known this information earlier, would have set the price at 50%, not 60%. Suddenly, the grandfather called Jun's name and woke him up. He said, at the beginning of the year, Sun Yan plans to announce a large-scale restructuring plan. Du Jun thought to himself, indeed, $1 billion is too hard to swallow. Oh, until now, he only sold subsidiaries, but never rearranged them. How many subsidiaries does he plan to rearrange? Du Jun said, you have made a difficult decision. The grandfather sighed and said, it's a good thing anyway, and it will gather the departments that only eat money or lose competitiveness, and deal with them thoroughly. No one will dare to imply that people like us are unfair dismissal anymore. At this time, Du Jun realized that he had forgotten that IMS was the best opportunity for the remaining companies. This was also the time when the big groups began to monopolize. The grandfather stood up and said, the family took this opportunity to do things that had been delayed. You are over 20 years old. I have to give you a gift. Du Jun was very surprised and looked forward to his gift. The grandfather continued, I will give you a small share of the group. I will also mention this in the new restructuring, so you can buy it at a low price. Du Jun didn't understand why his grandfather suddenly became so kind. The chairman smiled and said, you kid, you got Sunyan Motor but you are still happy with that little share? Then, at Sehun's familiar building, Sehun called Fantasy in New York. $400 million were transferred to the bank loan account the next morning in the main trading bank of Achin Group. Dozens of lawyers reviewed the contract that had been purchased with changed conditions. The contract was signed that afternoon. Today, I am an employee of Korea's second largest car company. On the first day of the new year 1998, at the chairman's mansion, the luxurious yellow lights were lit up. Everyone was immersed in the cheerful atmosphere of the family party. Du Jun was also here. Suddenly someone asked Sang Jun, I heard you study music. Sang Jun hurriedly bowed his head and greeted the grandfather chairman. As soon as he arrived, the chairman asked, do you want to be a singer? Sang Jun answered, no sir, I am studying to be a composer. The chairman was surprised and asked, what is a composer? Sang Jun explained, a composer creates albums for singers sir. The old man angrily scolded, you kid, of course I know that. Do you look down on me for being old? Sang Jun rarely met him but was scolded by him so he was scared. Then, he asked nervously, are you okay? The chairman asked back, what's wrong? Sang Jun quickly answered, I changed my study path according to my wish. The chairman smiled, just do what you want to do, this old man is too kind. It made Sang Jun a little confused. The chairman continued, learn from your father, I heard he is the owner of the biggest film company in our country, right? He asked his grandson, Du Jun's son. He quickly answered, oh no, not yet, it's still far away. The old chairman asked again, so, what have you achieved in the last 10 years in that tiny industry like a mouse tail? His son answered, this year, my company will rise to the top film company position, please don't scold me anymore. The chairman just smiled and didn't say anything else. Sang Jun met his grandfather again after a long time. He didn't expect his grandfather to change his personality. Du Jun's mother was also surprised because this father-in-law was too kind now. The old man called out, Sang Jun. It made Sang Jun startled, yes, sir. The chairman said, you look like your father, you have to finish your studies quickly and become the most successful person in 10 years. Sang Jun didn't expect his grandfather to suddenly become so kind. He heard him say and clenched his fist. He bowed his head and answered loudly, yes sir, I will become the best person. Du Jun stood aside and didn't say anything but just smiled. The first news on the New Year's TV broadcast was the decision to sell two banks. One was the representative bank established in 1992 under the name Chosun Savings Bank. Two was the local bank established in 1959 and later developed into a national bank. The reason that made the news more shocking was because both banks were designated as priority targets for foreign concessions. Everyone considered the bank as the place where the wealth of the nation was concentrated. So the people were very angry when IMS announced that they would intervene in the Emergency Financial Relief Fund. My gratitude disappeared, because I realized that they did not lend dollars but just borrow dollars to get the bank. Maybe among those who watched that news, I was the most surprised. I looked back at the notebook of memories from my previous life 10 times, but I didn't find this event. It's true that in college, I was too busy playing around and didn't care about economic news. One thought always appeared. If I knew in advance, could I buy back the bank, and could I buy it back now? The bank and the big conglomerates all wanted it, but couldn't. If I got that bank, it would be like growing wings. How much is the giant price to buy back 2 banks? 10 billion won or 10,000 billion won? The joy of owning a large car company disappeared. A new prey appeared right in front of me. The ambition to get that prey made me excited at the gate of the chairman's mansion. There were a lot of reporters standing outside. Luxury cars ran in one by one. There were a lot of luxury cars parked at the chairman's mansion. Some ladies flattered and said thanks to him for giving us a chance to visit the chairman's house of Sun Yen Group. It's true that family halo, everyone in this family looks handsome. Where's the newlywed house? Chai District? Mr. Dame Hannah? Or is it an apartment? The bride smiled and said, my husband's house is in Pyeongchang, starting a life as a daughter-in-law. A friend said, it's true that the tycoon family still lives in the Chinsu era. The bride smiled and said, you are silly, even if they tell me to go out and live separately, I have to cling tightly, there is no prince who lives outside the palace. I am the daughter-in-law of Vice Chairman Sun Yen, how can I cook, wash, and clean? My life only needs to sit at the breakfast and dinner table, and smile. The bride said arrogantly, it's worth it. In another corner outside the huge mansion of the chairman, some guys were gossiping about Jang Chun getting married. Who will lead us? Another guy said, do you still believe that? Marriage is just a mandatory ceremony, Young Chun will still play with us later. The groom Young Chun sighed tiredly, then changed his face and said, whoever hears will think there are only bachelors here. I got married the latest, you guys are just jealous. Among the friends after getting married, everyone only cares about their wives. I want to remind you not to do that. Another guy laughed and said, because their wives are richer, they have to live like that, how can they compare with Jeng Chun? Young Chun threw away his cigarette and said, forget it, after getting married I can't mess around anymore, the old man makes me work seriously. Then he used his expensive leather shoes to step on the cigarette butt, and continued, if I don't pay attention to my wife, I have to pay attention to my father-in-law, everyone is like that, what else, play moderately. The friends heard that and said, okay, we understand. Young Chun then waved his hand at his friends and said, I'm about to go on my honeymoon, wait for me to come back and have a few drinks. After saying that, he turned around and looked at one of his friends in the whole group, then the two went to a corner to whisper to each other. Young Chun asked, you had that little girl yesterday, right? His friend replied, the supporting actress in the movie? Young Chun answered, yeah, 2 days later send her on a plane to where I am. I will send you the address of the hotel, and arrange a date with the broker in Korea. His friend heard that and raised his eyebrows. Young Chun patted his friend's shoulder and said, the honeymoon lasts 10 days, how can I take someone I don't know, and let my palace go through 10 days? I also have to enjoy it. His friend replied, okay, let me arrange it, just consider this as my wedding gift. Then inside the magnificent mansion, some flatterers were bowing their heads to congratulate the chairman, congratulating him on whatever he did. They all bowed their heads. Congratulations to you, Mr. Chairman, the chairman also politely thanked. Suddenly there was a voice, Mr. Chairman, don't mind your uncle-in-law. The owner of the voice was an old man. He continued, this guest is a bit extravagant, to organize a small wedding like this, then go over and shake hands. The chairman also graciously replied, "Oh, my uncle-in-law's precious niece, but Nock should make her feel comfortable when she is at our house." Then the two old men shook hands as if they were fighting. The chairman smiled and said, "I have something to say, let's go somewhere else." The uncle-in-law didn't dare to refuse, also smiled and replied, "Yes." Then the two moved to a room that had been reserved in advance. There were 2 cups of tea in the large room with a table as big as a house. The two sat at opposite ends, looking at each other like they were going on a blind date. At this time, the chairman leisurely put down his teacup and called his uncle-in-law a word, "Chairman Hong, we have become one family now. It's time for you to stop." Then Chairman Hong didn't understand and asked back, "What do you mean?" The chairman changed his face and said, "You should stop sending people to follow my family." At this time the face of the uncle-in-law stiffened as if sprayed with glue. The chairman continued, "Your beloved niece is about to marry into a position of someone who will temporarily think that you want to find out what your uncle-in-law's family is like. But only until this point." Chairman Hong hurriedly denied, "No, not like that." At this time the chairman was furious and told him to shut up and listen to me. The chairman Hong was poorer, so he had to swallow his words when the other chairman spoke. The other chairman said, "Young Chun is not fully mature, so he still likes to play, even though he is 30 years old. Maybe you think he won't do anything, so you can easily control him." The chairman Hong did not refuse further, "No, sir, I don't think so." Then the other chairman continued to boast, "He can do whatever he wants, because he is my grandson." The chairman Hong had to be silent every time the other chairman was angry, because he was poorer. The other chairman continued to say, "Does my grandson have to live a lazy life?" "Why?" "Because he is my grandson." The chairman Hong did not dare to interrupt, he just sat there and listened to his preaching. After listening for a while, he was so angry that he could only squeeze his leg. The other chairman said again, "Don't call my grandson to your house at will, there is no such thing. Meet his wife's family instead. If you miss your niece, just call your own grandson back. Today is the last day Zhang Chun meets his family. If you happen to meet him, it's only for business. Only meet him when you need advertising." The chairman Hong did not understand why he had to listen to the old man's preaching, but the old man continued to say, "Anyone with the surname Hong is not allowed to set foot in any building named Sun Yan. The pen of the Hansung newspaper can be broken by Sun Yan's money." Until then, the chairman Hong still could not say a word, being poor was so miserable. Then the other chairman left coldly, and when he passed by, he left a sentence, "Don't underestimate what I just said." The chairman Hong sat in one place, like Chiang Mai who was sprayed with glue and stiffened. Then the other chairman left and slammed the door shut, leaving the chairman Hong alone. The more he thought about it, the angrier he got. The old bastard was calculating. He wanted his nephew to avoid his wife's house, which meant he considered Jin Young Chun as his heir. The old men did not have much time left, both him and Chairman Jin. But the future of the young ones was still very open. Both Hong Sung and Jin Young Chun were like that. Even if he wanted to warn others not to touch Sun Yan. But time was not on his side. Late that night, the study room of the chairman was lit up. The chairman and his youngest son, who was Du Jun's father, sat together for the first time. The son asked nervously, "What do you want to say?" The chairman asked if what his son did was true. The son answered, "Yes, that field is less affected by the foreign exchange crisis." The chairman asked again, "But it's not easy to attract film investors." The son replied, "It's not cheap but it can survive the storm. Other fields have to face the problem of survival rather than difficulty." Hearing his son say that, the chairman smiled kindly for the first time. Then he crossed his arms and said, "I can help you with your hand." The son was startled and said, "Don't joke anymore, I'm not as naive as before." The chairman heard his son react like that and felt tense but did not say anything else. His son just looked at him with a puzzled expression and thought for a while before saying, "Father, please speak, I need to go." The chairman closed his eyes, scratched his head, thought about something and then said, "Okay, I'll make it simple. I'll give you Sun Yan's Health Fund and Human Development Institute." The son was stunned and couldn't believe that his father was so generous to him. The hospital run by Sun Yan's Health Fund was one of the top 3 hospitals, very large, so just the tax alone was $1 billion. But the Human Resource Development Company Sun Yang is not enough to be called a business. Although it operates as an independent legal entity, it is also just a human resource development organization, specializing in training various levels such as training high school graduates, college graduates, new staff, and executives. The vice chairman looked at his son and asked, "Why did you react like that? Do you feel lacking?" The father thought to himself, "I don't expect anything, so just accept what I give." "There's one thing that I still feel uneasy about," the father thought of his son who was Du Jun, his beloved son. Then he clenched his teeth to suppress his anger and looked at his father and said, "Yes, I still feel very lacking." The old chairman couldn't believe that his son was so greedy. "What do you mean?" The 2 fathers and sons looked at each other without knowing what to say, just staring at each other, staring for a long time, but no one said anything. At this time, the chairman asked, "How can you lack when you don't care about our company? I thought you came to give up, now you have ambitions." A son who is not a son should also fulfill the responsibility of a father. The old man was surprised. The responsibility of a father? "Are you talking about Du Jun?" The son looked tense at his father and said, "Yes." The father heard that, sighed deeply, then fell silent for a moment. Then he said, "You asked Du Jun how much value the hospital and the Human Resource Development Company give you. That kid would know, maybe he would congratulate you with both hands." The son was shocked to hear that because he didn't know about these things. The money was from his son. The chairman continued, "You protect what I give you, then give them to Du Jun when the time is right. I will also take care of Du Jun separately. Of course, I won't give it for free but sell it cheaply." The son was surprised and said, "You sell it? You want to make money from your grandson too?" At this time, the old chairman snapped, "You just know that. This story, Du Jun will understand you better than you." The son heard that and stopped talking, thinking that this must be a lot of money. Then the chairman said, "There are eyes and ears of many people right now, only you know for now." The son stood up, bowed, and said, "Thank you, father." The father ordered him to go back, as if to say, "Just take it and go back, then play a first." The bride and groom who just got married sat alone in the plane cabin without anyone else. The new bride looked around looking for someone to talk to as if there was no one. Then she called her husband, "Young Chun, is this the plane you rented?" making the tycoon husband laugh out loud. Then he replied, "No, I just rented first class and business class seats only. Business class seats are for 6 bodyguards of my family." The wife heard that and panicked, "Oh my God, is this the life of a wealthy family? Even my father and grandfather can't do that." Then she took out a file from her bag and said, "Look at this please." The husband took it with indifference, so the wife had to urge him, "Hurry up and open it." The husband opened the file, then slowly took out a piece of paper inside. At first, he saw some pictures on the report paper. Then he saw that it was information about his family. He was very angry. How did they get such detailed information like this? They must have followed closely almost 24/7. The wife still smiled and continued, "As expected, the most notable people are Director Jinyanki and Du Jun. Director Jinyanki often meets with executives of subsidiaries, especially Du Jun, who has officially appeared next to Fantasy's director." The wife was talking when the husband angrily shouted, "You crazy bitch." The wife was shocked and asked, "What did you say?" The husband's face was like a hellish demon and he answered, "I already know what that oot guy is doing. How dare you follow my whole family?" The wife looked at her husband's face as if he was going to a funeral, and she started to be afraid. Then, the newlywed husband immediately tore up the report papers, which showed his whereabouts, while cursing and scolding his wife. You want to act like a boss when you are nothing but a motherfucker? You are disgusting. You just need to give me a son. If you dare to do anything without my permission, you will never escape from the room behind the house. Remember that well. At this point, the wife could only cry silently, and she did not dare to say anything. The husband finished scolding and angrily called out, "Secretary Choi, Secretary Choi." Choi ran in and said, "Yes, Director." The husband ordered, "We will separate when we arrive, so you find a hotel for me right away. Watch her closely, only let her go shopping, don't let her do anything else. Got it?" Looking at the wife, he felt a bit sorry but did not know what to do. The secretary just replied, "Yes, Director." The wife was very angry, clenched her fists, but did not dare to hit that rich guy. After cursing, the husband left that place, then found another seat on his luxury plane and sat alone. He thought to himself, the more he thought about it, the more disgusted he felt, but it was better this way. It was a good excuse for him to be free during the 10-day honeymoon. From the first day of marriage, he had made the person called his wife mentally collapse. He planned to call her 3 days later. He had met her the other day, but now he could call her as soon as he arrived, then the flight would continue to its destination. The couple enjoyed their honeymoon that night at the main character's house, Do-jun. Do-jun said to his father, "I think you are giving that person a favor." His father was surprised. But Do-jun explained. "People say that Sunyan Hospital has a lot of VIP customers. Even high-ranking officials of politicians do not want to reveal their health status, so they go to a place that keeps absolute secrets like Sundang Hospital. Many celebrities also go there." At this point, his father was very surprised to hear his son say this. Do-jun continued, "From now on, anyone who wants special treatment or privileges will contact you. That way you can build relationships gradually. When making movies, you can also take care of the director or the main actor at Sunyan Hospital." "What else?" his father asked. "What about human resource development?" Do-jun answered, "For this part, those who are promoted are trained at the Institute's training center. Although there is no guarantee of promotion from the evaluation, it also affects being eliminated from the promotion candidates." Hearing that, the father was even more surprised. Everyone knew that the Sunyan Group managed human resources very strictly. It was not like the training institute of other companies. The selection and training of Sunyan was very similar to a judicial training center. There was no loophole. It included training time, seminars, discussions, exams, and evaluations. Do-jun continued. Those who wanted to become the key figures of the company had to study at the Development Institute. If you became a director, many people would call you for help. All those people would become your network, the father replied. Then you would build relationships from both inside and outside the group, Do-jun also said. Yes, because you started to want it, you wanted to turn them into your people. But the father smiled and said, "Not into my people, I turned them into your people." Hearing that, Do-jun just smiled but did not say anything. The father asked curiously, "How can you understand my intention as soon as you hear it?" Do-jun answered, "It's because you don't care about these things." The father asked again, "Can you tell me about the share structure of the Human Development Institute? And the accumulated assets too? How is the current situation?" Do-jun answered, "Yes, of course. Not only about the network of acquaintances. If so, you wouldn't have told me to keep it secret. If they knew about this, they would oppose it with all their might." The father asked with a headache, "Is there still a secret behind the words to keep it secret?" Do-jun smiled and replied, "You are a person with many secrets that only tell new people. I seem to be more like grandfather than you, right? It's not easy to fulfill the duty of a father." Do-jun saw his father so kind, he just smiled silently, looking at his father. The scene switched to a very large company. This company did not pay salaries, but the employees in the building still went to work to keep their positions. They must have known that this company was about to go bankrupt, but they still tried to work to keep a glimmer of hope. They could not shine again, because every morning they opened their eyes. If they did not come to this building, they did not know where to go. The unpaid salary was also urging them. They hoped that they would get paid some part. Although everyone said it hundreds of times, they did not expect anything anymore. But it was the hopeless hope left in their hearts that tortured these employees. At this time, Do-jun and Mr. Si-hoon stood in front of the building. Do-jun coldly asked what would happen to those people. Mr. Si-hoon just smiled faintly and replied, "You have to become their savior. You have to pay their salaries and give them extra bonuses to boost their morale." At this time, the scene switched to the chairman's room. A fat man reached out and greeted me. "I am Kamijan, executive director of DA Construction." Si-hoon was in the room with 3 men from the company. Do-jun despised thinking, look at them, in the chairman's room there's only a butler but no chairman. Fantasy bought 5% of DA Construction shares. As soon as they received the notice from the major shareholders, they contacted each other for a meeting. Looking at the empty chairman's seat, Do-jun muttered, "I bought shares of a bankrupt company, so I had to pay more attention right away." If buying shares was a big investor who swallowed Asin Group like Fantasy, the more guilty they were, the more scared they felt. The fat director smiled and said, "We were very surprised. Suddenly your company wanted to buy our shares." Do-jun smiled coldly, he was just worried or scared. The fat guy said again, "Our company is not big enough for a big investor like Fantasy to care about. Can you share the reason?" Mr. Si-hoon smiled his commercial smile and answered, "There is no big reason for investors to buy shares. Of course, it is for money. How can he say it is not a big deal?" The fat director acted mysterious, stroked his chin, and said, "It is a bit unreasonable to say it from my mouth. Don't you read the news or watch the current affairs? You may face risks when you get involved in a company that is about to collapse like DA Construction. No one invests in shares these days. They all become beggars." An old man continued, "You have to put money in the bank. The interest rate is quite high." Mr. Si-hoon heard this and frowned disdainfully. He said to the old man, "Your position is higher than the executive director." Why did he turn black? He continued, "If you don't have a high position, please leave. The only thing you shareholders who bought more than 5% of the shares did was to come here and give it to the executive director. It is not the director's representative who communicates. The matter has annoyed me enough. Who are you to interfere?" The old man heard that and turned away immediately. The male lead did not say a word and looked at Mr. Si-hoon, who was angry. There, the fat director stood up immediately, bowed his head and said, "Please understand, the director is trying to raise capital to save the company." He even met with the assistant of the Sunhouse Credit Fund. After saying that, the fat director looked at the old man, who was ashamed. There, the old man immediately knew what to do, stood up, bowed. "I was rude, I really apologize to Mr. Si-hoon," he clasped his hands and replied. "So you should know what to do and avoid me. I want to talk quietly." The director looked at the old man and the fat one, and their 2 accomplices immediately knew what to do and bowed out of the room. The fat director then said to Si-hoon, "Please tell me the reason why you suddenly bought shares of our company." Mr. Si-hoon replied before answering, "Shouldn't you tell me the reason why you want to see me, Do-jun?" He looked at Mr. Si-hoon, for the first time seeing him like that. He was usually very polite, always saying bland jokes to show his humor. But now he was too rude and aggressive, surely because he thought the board of directors of DA Construction would embezzle the company's money. The director forced a smile and said, "I want to meet with you, just because I want to ask that reason only. Clearly you want something, just tell me straight away. The board's duty is to listen to what shareholders want." Mr. Si-hoon replied, "I told you already, But because I want to make money, that's what an investor is. The director raised his hand and replied. That's why I said, if you want to make money, you have to sell shares higher than the purchase price, but that is impossible. Mr. Sehun pretended to scratch his head and said, I don't know, maybe someone will buy it back at a better price. Is that so? The director heard that and glared at him, then said, Oh, I see, it could be like that. Let us find out then. There are still many people who believe that DA construction will revive. Those people must be preparing to buy most of our shares. Du Jun evaluated, it's not simple over there either. Mr. Sehun replied, you have tried so hard to that extent, so today we came here also has meaning. So can you quickly find that person? The director replied, we will find them as soon as possible. He calculated in his mind, will they quickly withdraw their plan before I destroy everything or will they delay to buy more time? Mr. Sehun stood up and said, we have said what we needed to say. We will take our leave now. The director saw this and pretended to reach out his hand. He said, fortunately, it seems that our esteemed shareholder is satisfied. We will try to find the right person and help Mr. Sehun's wallet become thicker.